So beautiful Roach Bream hybrid, probably it's really fat, it's got to be well over £3. Lovely hybrid there, just like being back in Ireland this is. So you join us for the third part of the Norfolk Broad series. A little bit different today because we're not actually on one of the Broads. We're just in the general area. So our intended venue for today was the River Waveney, what runs just behind these lakes here. But due to an unseasonably wet February, it's about 2 miles wide at the minute. So the Waveney's a nice little river. It changes quite a bit over its length. It starts 2 miles west of Des, runs through Des, Bungay down to Geldeston, and provides really good chub and roach fishing at this time of year. And then once it goes below Geldeston Lock, it becomes tidal, and you've got some great bream fishing as well as roach fishing down there through Beccles, Whirlingham, and then it joins the Alton Broad just before it loops back and goes out to the sea at Great Yarmouth. But Alton Broad is the most southerly of the Norfolk Broads, and although it's a fabulous fishery and could have been our venue for today, the end of February it's a bit hit and miss to do a feature for you guys. So what I've done is I've chosen one of the many gravel pits in the Waveney Valley. So there's quite a few of those that were originally formed while building the bypass along here, and it's made some fabulous fisheries. It's the nearest thing that you'll get to a motorway in this area. Traffic actually does go in both directions on these roads, but we don't have dual carriageway. But you've got a few famous fisheries. You've got Waverwood Pits, then below that you've got Waveney Valley Lakes, which is one of the first places where you could go in the UK to catch big carp. And then below that is Homersfield Lakes, which is a very famous carp fishery run by Martin Simmons. It's also done massive roach to over £4, believe it or not, and that's a fantastic fishery just a stone's throw from here. And we're actually on Broome pits today. So this is a complex of 4 lakes spread over 25 acres where you can just turn up and just stick it on the bank. So although the River Waveney is about half a mile that way, we can't get near it today, so we thought we'd show you this, because if you're in a similar situation down here on holiday or down here for a few days fishing and you find yourself in a similar situation, it's just really nice to know that you've got these fabulous fisheries on your doorstep and your whole holiday won't be ruined. So like I say, we've got 4 lakes here spread over 25 acres and predominantly carp fished, but what we're after today is some fabulous silverfish fishing, so we'll give it a go and see how we get on. Right, so we're at the fabulous Broome Pits fisheries today. It's a venue that I don't know all that well, so I've had to give the ground bait a little bit of thought. The lake we're on today is predominantly carp fish, so fish meal bait is going to be the basis of my mix today. But our target species are going to be skimmers, bream, hybrids, and hopefully some nice roach as well. So I don't want to go all out fish meal, I want to cut it with something else, and that's where the dilemma came in. The base of my mix is going to be the Superfeeder sweet fish meal, which has fast become my favourite ground bait for this sort of fishing. It's a very similar sort of mix to the well-known Thatchers and F1, but just with a little bit more body to it. It's also got the caramel flavour that you'll recognise from Brasem, and also a little bit of salt in it, which I think when the temperatures drop is quite an important ingredient. Now to that, when you're thinking roach and hybrids and things like that that feed off the bottom, Adding something like Black Lake with coriander, which is very, very active, might be a good ingredient. But I'm thinking today we want to try and attract bigger fish, big roach, and things like that. So maybe an active ingredient isn't the way to go. So I'm going to dilute it down with sweet skimmer today, which is a biscuit-based ground bait, but it's still got the same sweet caramel flavour that the other one, so they work very well together. But it just takes the edge off the fish meal, so it'll be a little bit more roach friendly, if you like. And then the only other ingredient to that is the bait booster as well. I always think a liquid additive is very important in all ground baits, be it a flavour, a sweetener in this case, or something simple like liquid molasses, anything like that. It can't be sold in ground bait by a company, but I think a liquid ingredient always helps flavour to disperse in the water. It's more soluble and stuff like that. So I'm going to add the equivalent of a capful of this, 2 parts super feeder, 1 part sweet skimmer, and then a similar amount of water. So we've got 3 parts ground bait, 1 part water. So I'll just quickly knock that together and show you how easy it is to mix. Right, so we've got all our dry ingredients together. So there's 3 bait boxes of dry ground bait, 2 of the super feeder and 1 of the sweet skimmer. And then I've got another one of these full of water with the liquid ingredients added to it there. And rather than adding it a little bit at a time, I'm just going to add it all in one go. That way all the particles get saturated, they all swell up to their maximum, and you get a much nicer mix then. So dried ingredients all going in one go. As you can see there, that looks almost ruined, but believe me, with all the crushed pellets and crushed biscuits in there, within 5 minutes that will come back to a beautiful mix. We can then push through a riddle, and by the time we get to the peg, that'll be perfect. So we're all set up and we're ready to do our initial feed for today's session. Needs a little bit of thinking about, because normally if the water was highly coloured, I'd maybe do half a dozen feederfuls in a very tight area and try and fish as accurately as what I could. But the water's actually quite clear today. We're going to be catching big fish, and what will happen when you hook a big fish, it'll flash, it'll turn in the peg, and those fish will immediately spook off it. So although I'll still try and do the initial like 6 big feederfuls tight to start off with, I'm probably going to put another 4 or 5 in, sort of a yard or so to the side. So if the fish do back off, there's a little bit of feed still in the area, a little bit more feed to draw them into the general area as well. And if the fish do get a little bit spooked, they're not spooking away from your peg. So that means I'll probably put in 10 initial feederfuls rather than just the normal 6. Now, we've got quite a strong headwind here today, so I'm going to make life really easy for myself. I'm not going to use a big bait up feeder. If the wind catches a big bait up feeder and blows it off course a couple of times, it's quite a disaster when you're trying to plan where to put your bait really accurately. So I'm just going to do everything through an XL rocket feeder. That means I haven't got to set a separate baiting up rod. I've just got the one fishing rod. I can easily cast that with that, with the rocket feeder design I can place the bait exactly as I want it. So as we saw initially, I've mixed that ground bait up, and what looked like a horrible porridge a little while ago has come round absolutely perfectly. Just pushed it through a riddle and it comes round perfectly. So I've got a quantity of that for the initial feed, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to put some worms in it, but I'm not going to use my normal finely chopped worms. I'm just going to put a small handful in, but really roughly chop them. So hopefully if there's a few bigger fish there, it'll resist the attentions of the smaller fish, which I think they'll naturally be attracted to the ground bait anyway. So I'm going to try and make this initial feed quite big fish friendly. So we've got some big pieces of worm there. Going to add a little bit of corn, and then quite a good helping of casters to make quite a rich initial feed. So I'm going to go in with about 10 of those, and then we'll get hook length on and get fishing and feel our way into the session from there. Okay, so the setup for today is my standard still water setup. If you're allowed to use braid, this is pretty much what I use in most venues, both here and abroad. If the only thing what changes will be the rod length and the tip size. So I've got 012 absolute feeder braid on the reel. I prefer the 012 to the other strains for the majority of fishing, apart from if you go into extreme range and you need something very thin on the reel. But 012 just is more abrasion resistant, it eliminates wind knots, all sorts of things like that. You don't have any problems with it at all, so I just like the durability of using 012. One thing that's important with braid is to very slightly underfill the spool, so just a little bit less line than what you would if you were fishing the equivalent monofilament line. That just helps sort of a slight braking effect on the braid, and again stops any wind knots or any problems with that at all. And also never cast a dry braid. I've got my atomizer here that always just give it a quick squirt at the start of a session before I feed or anything like that, and that'll eliminate any tangles that you have with braid. And then for the majority of my fishing, I'll just have a full length shock leader, in this case just 10 pound mono. You can have a short shock leader if you're fishing for little fish close in, or if you want to push the rod to extreme range for that particular rod. Say you were fishing somewhere and you wanted the finesse of a nice soft rod, but it's just a little bit out of casting range, then fishing the braid straight through will add another 10 yards onto the casting range of that rod. So places that I'm thinking of, somewhere maybe like Southfield in the winter, where you want to fish a long way out but you're fishing quite delicately for nice sized fish, fishing braid straight through will allow you to use a shorter, softer rod. But on today's session we've just got 012 braid, 10 pound mono, and then my standard running feeder setup. So basically what I've got here is a little homemade link incorporating a size 14 diamond eye swivel, short length of 30 pound braid, just 1.5 inches long, and then the snap from a Waggler link swivel. So that makes up the little link, and by having that swivel as small as that means I haven't got to have any stoppers. So you'll see there the 10 pound shock leader just comes straight down to a 3-turn water knot, to which I've attached 022 fluorocarbon, and that swivel just rests against that knot. It won't go over it, don't need any stoppers or anything that could potentially tangle on the rig at all. Just a very neat, very lightweight setup there. Then that 022 fluorocarbon I'll have as a stiff boom. That helps push the line away from the feeder, and then just have an attachment on the end of that to which I'll have whatever hook length I want. In this case I'm starting with about 75 centimetres because I expect a few fish to be off the bottom coming to the commotion of the initial feed, and then as the fish get more and more competitive with the food that's on the bottom, I'll shorten that down to maybe 60 or even 50 centimetres, just by reducing that there. Normally I'll just have a little knot on the end of there and attach the hook length as though you're looping the line behind a Dacron connector on a pole, but today I've gone for loop to loop because we've got a relatively heavy hook length and hopefully we're going to be winding in fish very quickly. So I've gone for a little bit more security as a loop to loop, but if you want it even more tangle free, try the knot, and if you're using lighter hook lengths like 012 or 010, that works absolutely perfectly. So today we're expecting quite a lot of fish here today, almost like Irish fishing for example, and we can do a lot of the things that we do over there on today's session. It's predominantly carp fished here. It's a fantastic fishery for carp, but it's very rarely silverfish fished for, so we can take advantage of that and hopefully fish a little bit cruder. They're not used to being caught, so I've got an 016 fluorocarbon hook length and a GPM size 14 hook, which looks, considering the fishing that I've been doing all winter at Hallcroft and on the fen drains, it looks absolutely humongous, but I'm sure we're going to get plenty of bites, and that's going to work well. So I've done all the initial feed with an XL window feeder, made it dead easy for myself, just so I can cast it on my normal rod. I can place every feeder full exactly where I want in this headwind, haven't had any dramas or anything like that at all. And then I'm going to start on a small, and just feel the way into the session, and then if the fish are particularly ravenous, I can step up to a bigger feeder size. But what I think might happen, if I fish a bigger feeder, I might end up with too many fish in the peg, getting too many false indications and not actually catching them efficiently. So that's why I'm going to start on a small, just feel the way in and see how it goes. So I've just put a few extra casters in, same mix as my initial feed, double maggot on the hook to start, and we'll see how we get on. So just hit the clip, follow the feeder down to the bottom, and then quickly on the rest. I've got a 1 ounce superior tip in here because of the wind strength, and they're quite a fast taper tip, so you can see there I'm in touch and fishing straight away. Haven't got a faff about sinking the line or try to pick up any bow in the line or anything like that. In fact, I could have easily reached that distance with a 30 gram window feeder, but I've gone with a 45 just to A, get to the bottom to the fish a lot quicker, but B, to tighten everything up a lot faster, so I'm in touch very, very quickly. If I get any bites on the drop, I haven't got any problems with spotting those or anything like that. Just makes the whole process a lot easier and a lot faster. But because of the shape of a window feeder, it's not like casting a normal big heavy feeder. It's just dead simple, and this rod manages it easily. It's a nice soft rod, 11 foot Superior X, which I'll be glad of. If we hook a few big fish on this braided setup, I'll be glad of a soft rod and the cushioning effect what it gives. So here we go, into our first fish. It's taken a couple of casts just to get into a fish. I've had a line bite first cast and a little roach bite second cast. We're into a decent fish straight away. You can see there the benefit of using the softer rod with the braid. Braid hasn't got any stretch in it whatsoever. So the beauty of the soft rod is it gives that back, but it keeps all the accuracy of being able to fish a braided line. So every cast is exactly right. It's not affected by the wind. You can move the feeder along the bottom if you want to straighten the hook length out. So you've got all those advantages, but this lovely soft rod just puts the insurance factor back into it. So what have we got here? Feels like a bream, but the thing with this place is you never know. There's massive hybrids in here, great big roach, big perch. You never really know what you're going to get. Yeah, here we go. Bream first cast. So not a bad start to the session. Just on double maggot there. So one thing worth just pointing out when using a window feeder, there's two main ways to load the feeder up. Just get rid of this bream slime off the hook length. So the initial way, how it was actually designed, and a good way if the water's clear, like what you get on a lot of these gravel pits or if you're fishing in Ireland, is to actually fill the feeder full of loose feed. So I've got my little pick and mix bowl here with chopped worm and caster, and I've literally filled the window feeder completely full of feed and just the tiniest little smear of ground bait just to cover that window up, and that's as close to loose feed as what you can get. So it does suit clear water conditions very well, but it also gets the maximum amount of bait to the bottom. The other way is to just scoop it through with a mix like that. So if you want to control the peg a little bit more, if you don't want as much bait going in the peg, then you've got that option, just filling it just like a normal feeder, and doing that as well. So as it's early in the session, I'm going to fill it full of bait on the majority of casts until there's a few fish there, and then just tone it down a little bit to control what we catch from there. So good start. We'll see what happens now. So I'll just talk you through how I go about fishing in these situations where the bites are coming quite thick and fast. You'll notice I've got a very long front rod rest, so that will become apparent now. So I'll just get this out. So just hit the clip. The braid sinks very, very well, so you haven't got to worry about sinking the line. And with that fast taper quiver tip, we're sort of in touch straight away. So I can see there if I get any sort of indication on the drop. And then the beauty of the long rod rest is, as soon as that sort of belly's gone out of the line, once the feeder is sunk, you can just draw that along that rod rest just to keep in touch. Just to make sure there's just a little bit of tension on that tip and you're fishing straight away. If you had a shorter rod rest, you'd have to control that with the reel, and that'd be a little bit more difficult to keep in touch, a little bit more difficult to see what was a bite and what you'd actually done with the reel, rather than what you can with the long rod rest. So if you're in these sort of situations, either here or in Ireland, they really are worth getting hold of for that reason. The other thing as well is if the lake is towing, you can use that to the advantage, because you can pull it back to the maximum and then just reduce the tension on the tip by working it along the rod rest if the lake's towing badly. But today, although we've got a strong headwind, we haven't got a lot of tow on the lake, so the tip is sitting very nicely. So as soon as I go in, I'm just getting a few little indications, a few little liners. In these sort of situations when there's a lot of fish there, you don't want to go picking up on everything and missing bites and things like that. The key is being efficient. So it's worth just leaving it just a tiny little bit longer, just to make sure the fish is on. It's a positive indication. You're not going to foul hook anything and lose it in the peg and spook the fish. Just read the tip, see what's happening, and then just wait for a positive pull round and away you go. So we're starting to get a few fish in the peg already. Obviously we've had that bream to start off with. I think we're going to get spells of those. There's going to be smaller roach move in shoals. They're quite ravenous, quite fast moving, and they're going to sort of decimate the bait a little bit. And then every now and again I think we're going to get waves of bigger fish come in. Bream, hopefully big roach, hybrids as well. Just like being back in Ireland, the hybrids are massive, and the bites are something else. You'll see when I get one, the rod will be at critical stage in about a second. So fingers crossed we can catch some of those for the camera today. And we'll just feel our way in and just keep trying to fish like that. Just fishing down one hole and just letting the fish settle. All the time I'm mindful of not picking up on any slight indications or anything like that. I'm going to wait for a proper pull round. You have to be a little bit careful on here because I'm fishing barbless hooks, so it is possible that a small roach can knock the bait off, but I'd rather do that than to foul hook a fish or come in and miss one. So I'm just trying to be more efficient with my time and just wait for a positive pull. We're still on maggots at the minute, but there's a couple of little tricks when there's a lot of fish there that I can show you, with hooking the maggots differently and fishing worms and things like that, just so you can leave it a little bit longer to make sure there's a fish on each time. So we've got a few fish there already, but it's not absolutely solid. But here we go, we're in another good fish. This feels a little bit lively for a bream, so I'm not sure what this is. Like I say, it's a fabulous fishery. You never really can tell. All the time in the back of my mind I'm praying that we get a massive roach. It is quite famous for big roach. Certainly going well. I'm glad of this heavier hook length. Another bream. It's strange, clear water bream always seem to fight a bit harder than bream in coloured water. I thought it was moving a bit too quickly. I was half expecting this to be a hybrid. But another £3. I'll just shorten the hook length up very slightly. Just because the bites aren't coming on the drop or anything like that, which you'd expect with bream. The fish are grubbing around on the bottom. If they were more hybrids and big roach, you'd expect maybe once the feeders hit the bottom, but before the hooks hit the bottom, you might get a few bites on the drop. So I've just shortened it down to 60 centimetres, so we're not tight to the feeder, but we're just getting to the bottom a little bit quicker if there is more bream there than other fish at the minute, and then we'll just see how it goes from there. So we've got a roach on this time. One thing what I see a lot of people doing with feeder fishing is to pump the rod when they get a fish on. The only trouble is when you pump the rod and wind, it just it gives the fish a chance to turn its head each time. So every time the line goes a little bit slack when you move the rod down to wind in, gives the fish a chance to turn. So if you wind steadily and progressively quicker, you get the fish swimming straight, so there's less chance of losing it, although you're actually in effect speeding the whole process up. You've got less chance of losing it because the fish is turning less. And also, as you can see there, it's a lovely big roach, 6 ounce, but I've not had to net that at all because the fish has been moving straight. It's not been flapping around when it's come to the top of the water. So if they're in an obliging mood like what they are, and you can get away with reasonably heavy kit, if you try that trick with roach, it really speeds things up. Like I say, just get them moving dead straight, and when they come out nice and straight like that, you can just lift them straight out and be surprised what size fish you can lift out like that without any chance of them dropping off. Just a little bit nicer for them than faffing about with the net. A word of warning though, don't do it with skimmers. Skimmers are very soft-mouthed fish, so it's always worth taking time out to net a skimmer. But with roach, you can speed things up quite quickly by doing that sort of winding method rather than pumping them in. And like I say, you'll lose a lot less fish as a result. So one little trick what I'm going to try now, there's obviously a lot of fish there, but fishing barbless on this venue, every now and again the roach are just knocking the bait off, and I can't leave it as a positive enough indication to wind in with a fish every single time. So I'm just going to try and hook the bait a little bit differently. Now this is a great trick when you're on a lot of fish, but instead of just hooking the maggots normally, I'm actually going to thread one onto the hook. So as you can see there, that's right up the shank. Now if you're on an absolute shed full of fish, that's a good bait just on its own, but today I'm just going to turn it into like what I call a long maggot with a maggot on there as well. So hopefully it'll give a little bit of extra attraction. But if a roach knocks that one off, I can just leave that a little bit longer to make sure the fish is on, so I'm not wasting any time winding back without a fish on. So I'll give that a little go for now. So all the time I'm watching for early indications and early signs of fish. There we go. That's a bite on the drop that hadn't hit the bottom. Another lovely fish. I think this might be one of these little hybrids. No, it's big roach. Do fight well in this clear water. There we go. So the threaded maggot trick worked really well. That's not bad, is it? I'll just repeat the process. One maggot threaded up the shank, and another one just hooked normally on the bend of the hook. Straight out. As soon as it hits the bottom, just keep in touch. When the feeder hits the bottom, just draw it back along that long rest and you're fishing straight away. I'm just watching the tip all the time, so the feeder's hit the bottom, but I'm still expecting that hook just to be sinking through the fish at the minute, and it'll probably be on the bottom about now. I've had a little jab at it, but by having that maggot threaded up the shank, I'm confident that a fish hasn't knocked the bait off or anything like that on the way down. Obviously on other venues where you can fish micro-barbed, you can be a little bit more relaxed in trying to wait for a more positive indication. I've had a couple of little taps here already. I'm fairly sure there's still bait on the hook. Just want to be efficient with coming back with a fish every time. Just changed bait to a section of worm there, and we've got one of the Roach Bream hybrids. It's as you can see, quite a lively fish. For some reason, hybrids always seem to fight very, very hard. You know, much harder than either a roach or a bream itself. But good pound. So what I've done, because there's quite a number of fish here, in a similar way to what we were doing with the threaded maggot, I'm just picking a medium-sized worm and threading it on the hook, almost like I was sea fishing with lugworm. Just pop the bait over the spade, and I'm leaving a length dangling at the minute. If there's a lot of fish there, I'd literally nip that off level with the bend, and you get a bait that's almost looks like a freshwater shrimp with the hook coming around. If there's a lot of fish there, that's a fantastic bait that you very rarely miss a bite on. But at the minute we're still trying to target bigger fish, so I've just gone for a bigger bait. But by threading it up the shank and popping it over the spade as we have done, hopefully that will stay in position. If it gets pecked and knocked by little roach, it won't get knocked off the hook. So it really is a fabulous fishery here. We're on B Pit today. There's 4 lakes here that make up this complex, spread over 25 acres. And although we've had an unseasonably mild February with a lot of rain, we still had a frost last night. It's very, very cold sitting here in the wind. But we're still getting a bite of cast on tackle that you could probably pull the plug out with. And catching some beautiful fish. It really is a fabulous fishery. So this pit, B Pit, is predominantly carp fished. There's carp to nearly 40 pounds in this one, maybe just over. Big pike, big tench, as well as our target species of roach, bream and hybrids. Behind me there's a smaller pleasure lake with a lot of silverfish in and smaller carp. That's C Pit. And just as you come in, A Pit, that's the deepest of all these gravel workings, and that's also got carp in it, but it's famous for its big roach as well. And then last of all, D Pit, over at the back there is a very secluded lake. It's quite a large lake, but it's only got 8 swims on it. and that's got the biggest carp in to well over 40 pounds, big pike, big roach. You never really know what you're going to catch on that one, and due to the fact that these pits have been here for quite a long while now, it really does throw up some surprises. But what interests me the most is the fact that they're very rarely silverfished. So all the carp lads that fish here regular spotting a lot of particles, a lot of pellets, that sort of thing. So the silverfish just absolutely thrive on it. It just gets better and better, and they're left alone pretty much. So it's a real treat coming down here. All you do is just turn up, stay ticket on the bank. The bailiff just comes round. They're always good for any advice and whatever as well. And really is just dead simple. Tom Harbiston, the lad what runs the fishery, has done a fantastic job. He's spent an absolute fortune on otter fencing the fishery and making sure all the facilities are good. We've got lovely platforms here to fish off, which is a nice treat after having the last couple of weeks fishing in the fens and getting absolutely covered in mud. It really is nice to come down here on a well looked after fishery and catch a lot of fish in the process as well. So they've done a very good job here, very good indeed. So what I'm trying now, there seems to be a lot of roach in the peg. I say smaller roach, but they're still sort of 6 to 8 ounces. But a fabulous way to catch those is similar to what I did with the bigger piece of worm earlier, but just thread it on and then nip it off level with the bend so there's no bait hanging below the hook, and then just give it a little squeeze so the mouth of the worm goes over the spade of the hook. It almost forms a bait like a freshwater shrimp. But the beauty of that is because it won't get knocked off the hook, you can leave any tips and taps until you're sure that the fish is on. So when you're catching a lot of fish and they'll accept sort of a bait that doesn't look particularly appetizing, that's a really good way of doing it to hit all the bites and become really efficient. So you put a fish in the net all the time, you're not missing bites and coming back without a fish. So while there's a few roach there, I'll persevere with this, and then if the swim goes quiet and I think there's a bream or two about, I'll change the bait again and try and work out the best way to catch those. So it's quite an interesting peg, this one. It's when I plumbed up earlier on, just used an ounce bomb and just had a few casts around. As with a lot of these gravel pits that have been excavated, there's deeper seams within the pit. So sort of to my left, I've only got a count of 2 on a 1 ounce bomb, but as I come round, it almost goes down a slope in front of me until directly in front and just slightly to the right, it drops off to virtually the full depth of the lake, which under normal conditions is about 12 foot. I think with the extra water on, it's probably about 14 feet today. And it almost sort of comes in on a V. So I've got the shallow water dropping off to the deep water. I'll just get this fish in, forming this sort of deep sort of little scoop, if you like, down to the main depth of the lake. And I think that's sort of a natural fish holding spot, especially with the cold conditions today. I don't think they're going to be up on top of the bars in the shallow water. So that's where I fed today, just very slightly to my right at 32 metres, just into that full depth, and seems to be working very well at the minute. But interesting swim to fish though, because it's given me the option of going into the shallow water if need be as well. So I've got a few options covered in the one swim here if I did need to change anything, but the way things are going at the minute, I don't really need to change anything. So another lovely roach. So feeders wise today, obviously you saw me do the initial bait up with the window feeder, and I'm fishing window feeders, and that seems to be enough attraction to draw the fish in at the minute. There's enough bait that's coming out of the hex mesh to just draw the fish in, but it's keeping the bait contained enough on the bottom to make it easy to get bites and keep the fish under control. I'm sort of swapping between just putting a lot of bait in the feeder and just capping the window, and then every now and again, if I think there's too many fish there, I'm just going in with ground bait with just the odd caster in. But the only other feeders that I've brought today, pretty much all that I do on the majority of still water venues like this, is bring a selection of window feeders, some solid and some hex mesh. The solid ones I'd use if I really was having problems with line bites and missed bites and fish being a bit scatty. I'd swap to a solid feeder, so there's literally nothing coming off on the way down, the bait's just on the bottom. Or if I wanted to feed a large quantity of worms, I could do that and not squeeze the worms out of the holes. So window feeders are the number one choice. And then I've just brought hex mesh and wire cage feeders as well. So basically, if I was fishing today and I wasn't getting the response that I am now, I'd switch to one of those to have more particles falling through the water to try and get try and draw more fish in. So I've done the initial feed and laid the bed of feed on the bottom with the XL window, but the fish have got to find that, and sometimes if the fish are up in the water or anything like that, you need to try and draw them down. So by using an open mesh or a hex mesh bullet feeder, that makes the job nice and easy for you. Now, we can use all of these sorts of feeders on a still water because you haven't got flow to contend with like you have on a river, so you don't need a side weighted feeder that won't roll. You can take advantage of the end weight of these sort of feeders to really get the most of the efficiency with casting and the accuracy what they give you. So on the majority of still waters where I can get away with it, I'll use those. The only other feeders that I'd bring, maybe in the summer, I might have a very close inline, and that way you could fish that with a normal side weighted feeder because you haven't got any problems with casting there at all. But any distance, like I say, I'd take advantage of these feeders because although you might not struggle to cast there with a side weighted feeder, on a day like today where there's a bit of wind on or you've got a side wind that's gusting, a side weighted feeder will just, every now and again, it will just catch that wind and it'll be difficult to end up in the right spot. So these feeders really are the ones to try. Now, the reason why I've got the two meshes of these ones are to hold different sorts of mix. If I want to make the mix very wet, so it sinks quite quickly, although it gives off a bit of a cloud, I might try and contain that more in the hex mesh. If I want more of a dry mix that comes out on the way down, I might use the more open mesh. But by bringing both, you can just switch to them and see how you get on. But luckily today, we've not had to go down that road because there's been enough fish in the swim to try and get a few together just by fishing the window feeder. So it's been a nice simple day so far, just with the one style of feeder. And although there's quite a lot of roach there at the minute, they're not quite into a rhythm of catching one every cast. There's a few taps and things like that, but I'm just trying to control that. So in the end, hopefully what we'll get is where we go in, we'll get a bite that's on every single time. So trouble with roach is they're very fast moving fish, and they'll come in, they'll be a bit scatty, pecking at bait all the time, and it just takes a little while just to settle them down into a catchable situation. That's why I'm still persevering with the smaller of the window feeders. I think if I put more bait in still, I'd get a situation where there's just too many fish there and I was missing too many bites. But if I wasn't getting bites, obviously it would be the reverse. I'd try and do what I can to put bait into the peg to draw more and more fish in. But once they're there, you've then got to control them and make them catchable. And that's what we're trying to do at the minute. So just tighten up dead quick to the feeder. Just got that little worm head on the hook at the minute, so I can leave any little taps and whatever and just try and wait for a proper pull round. And also I'm trying to read the swim as well. If I went in and I wasn't getting these little plucks and pulls from roach, I'd assume that something's changed within the swim. Maybe a pike's moved in, but more often than not it'll be a bream or two have moved in. So then maybe switching to a bigger bait and leaving it out there longer rather than going in and out and trying to force the peg. It might be that a bream or two's there, so you can go out on a bigger bait, just leave it a bit longer and you're rewarded with a bigger fish. But if you just try and read what's happening within the swim all the time, you can sort of get an idea of what's going on. So like I say, I'm getting a lot of little indications now without being able to put fish in the net, so I've got to try and sort of calm that down a little bit and try and become more efficient. So just go onto a smaller little piece of worm on the hook, make sure I've not got any hanging below that bend of the hook. I'm just going in virtually neat ground bait, just the odd caster, just to try and calm the swim down a little bit. So I've got another great big fish here. Really don't know what you're going to get here. I think it's going to be a big hybrid. Yeah, here we go. Lovely big roach bream hybrid. They fight like mad, so although 0.16 seems like a horrendous hook length to fish for silver fish, when they go as quick as these, you really do need them. So lovely hybrid there, just like being back in Ireland this is, but considerably closer. Got another big fish here, sort of wrapping up a fantastic day here. I mean, it's so cold today, you wouldn't believe it. So you could probably tell by the dewdrop on the end of my nose, but still been a great session, absolutely fabulous sport here. God knows what it's going to be like in the summer. But just nice and easy to fish, excellent access to the swims, and it's just turn up, tick it on the bank. They really do a nice job of the fishery here. I'll just see what this one is. Another great big hybrid. Really do, they fight like carp, really. Here we go. Almost the size of the bream. Oh, get it over my net. Just unhook this and then hold it up for you. So beautiful roach bream hybrid, probably it's really fat, it's got to be well over 3 pounds. Fight like demons in this clear water, but lovely way to end the session today.